Welcome to the Shorten Anime channel. Today we'll dive into the latest episode of The Great Ruler. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support the channel. The Great Ruler Season 2, Episode 1. A green light that was filled with vitality surrounded the emerald-like spirit Zoisha. An enticing aroma was constantly being emitted from the grass, which would cause anyone's mouth water. So this is the yin-yang spirit Zoisha? From behind, Ye Qingling's voice rang out. As she exclaimed at the sight of the spirit Zoisha sitting on the slope, Mu Chen noticed that she had also brought Wang Sheng and the others over. Mu Chen smiled and nodded. He then looked at Ye Qingling and spoke. The yin-yang spirit Zoisha belongs to me this time. Consider it a favor, okay? This information came from you. Moreover, you were the one that defeated the spiritual beast outside. This item naturally belongs to you. There is no need to talk about favors. Ye Qingling smiled. However, there are still many worldly treasures inside the valley. Although they aren't as outstanding compared to the yin-yang spirit Zoisha, they are still decent. It will be beneficial to our cultivation. Pick as much as you want, Mu Chen laughed. Then I'll have to thank you. Ye Qingling nodded. She did not say anything more and waved her hand as she brought the others to pick the other worldly treasures in the area. Mu Chen moved quickly and rushed over to the location of the yin-yang spirit Zoisha. His hand was wrapped with spiritual energy as he inserted it directly into the slope. Afterwards, he dug out the yin-yang spirit Zoisha along with a massive boulder. Once the yin-yang spirit Zoisha was plucked by Mu Chen, an emerald light flowed out and entered the symbol on Mu Chen's forehead. The golden light from the symbol instantly turned richer and showed signs of increasing from a rank 5 to a rank 6. After feeling the changes that were made to his symbol, Mu Chen's eyes were filled with surprise. It seemed that searching for worldly treasures could be a decent method of increasing the symbol's ranks. Unfortunately, it was extremely rare to find worldly treasures that were filled with spiritual aura such as the yin-yang spirit Zoisha. Mu Chen lowered his head to look at the yin-yang spirit Zoisha on top of the boulder. The beauty of this worldly treasure could only be seen close up. Within the sparkling colors, a dense and pure spiritual energy fluctuation was emitted. Mu Chen smelled the enticing aroma, and the spiritual energy within his body shook. A strange feeling filled his heart. It was the feeling of wanting to attempt a breakthrough. I'll absorb it here right now and attempt to break through to the spirit stage. This idea flashed through Mu Chen's mind, and his eyes twinkled. He sat down decisively upon the floor of the valley. Then he took a deep breath and gradually calmed down. As he was calming himself, his hands were covering the yin-yang spirit Zoisha from both above and below. Suddenly, Mu Chen's spiritual energy began to surge out. Boom! The boulder, which the yin-yang spirit Zoisha was on, turned into dust underneath the spiritual energy pressure, and the yin-yang spirit Zoisha also cracked open slightly. An emerald liquid filled with extraordinary spiritual energy flowed out, and the valley instantly turned hazy as a seductive scent spread out. The pressure of the spiritual energy within Mu Chen's hands gradually increased, and it finally compressed the yin-yang spirit Zoisha into a clump of emerald liquid. The liquid was filled with an extraordinary spiritual energy, which caused Mu Chen's hands to tremble. As Mu Chen inhaled, the emerald liquid rose up and turned into a stream of green droplets, which entered Mu Chen's mouth. Boom! Once the emerald liquid, which was filled with extraordinary spiritual energy, entered Mu Chen's body, and his skin immediately turned green. His entire being seemed to swell. Rumble. An amazing spiritual energy was raging like a flood within Mu Chen's body. He hurriedly gathered his thoughts and circulated the Great Pagoda art in order to swiftly ingest the massive spiritual energy within his body. However, the spiritual energy from the yin-yang spirit Zoisha was truly enormous. Now that it had entered Mu Chen's body, it actually showed signs of losing control. Just when Mu Chen was somewhat troubled by it, a sudden suction of energy appeared from within his aura sea. It immediately took a portion of the pure spiritual energy away. This scene initially stunned Mu Chen, but he immediately concentrated and noticed that the spiritual energy entered the Nine Netherbird's body, who was laying down on top of the mandala flower. As the Nine Netherbird absorbed the Zoisha's spiritual energy, the dim color on its body instantly lightened up. Then black flames started to rise from its body once again. What are you looking at? It was you who made me this weak. Right now you have way too much spiritual energy. It wouldn't harm you if I take a bit away from you. The Nine Netherbirds seemed to be aware of Mu Chen's gaze, and a cold message was immediately conveyed over. Mu Chen smiled bitterly and said hesitantly, "Are you planning to attack me secretly again?" He remembered the previous time during his breakthrough when the 9 netherbirds secretly attacked him. And now the breakthrough this time was even more important than before. If anything terrible happened, he would truly regret it. "If you have this wish, I can indulge it for you." A mocking thought was conveyed over by the 9 netherbird. Mu Chen smiled awkwardly and relaxed. Then he ignored the 9 netherbird and focused on ingesting the massive spiritual energy within his body as he prepared to break through into the spirit stage. In the valley, Ye Qingling and the others were picking the other spirit tree's spirit fruits. The spiritual auras from these spirit fruits were far inferior compared to the yin-yang spirit zoisha. However, they were still beneficial for cultivation. What a rich spiritual aura! Wang Sheng suddenly turned around and stared at the depths of the valley. An enticing aroma emitted from that location, along with dense spiritual aura. Ye Qingling paused for a moment. She immediately understood that Mu Chen was probably ingesting the yin-yang spirit zoisha and frowned. "Do we have people keeping an eye out for trouble?" "Yes. Relax, Sister Ye. We have people being vigilant," Wang Sheng laughed. Just when Wang Sheng said these words, a humming sound rang out from outside the valley. The crowd of people inside the valley instantly changed their expressions. Once she heard the sound, Ye Qingling immediately rushed to a high slope and stared out into the distance. Swish! 2 other figures quickly rushed over to the high slope from nearby. They said in panic, "Sister Ye, this is bad. We discovered 2 groups charging over towards us." Ye Qingling's face changed slightly and asked, "Is it the Ge clan?" We did not discover Ge Hai's figure from these 2 groups," one of the men muttered. Ye Qingling's eyes turned serious and murmured, "It seemed that Ge Hai wasn't the only one that knew of the yin-yang spirit zoisha being here. That bastard truly had bad intentions from the start." "Sister Ye, what should we do?" Wang Sheng hurriedly asked. The 2 groups of men were definitely comparable to the Ge clan. Otherwise, Ge Hai wouldn't have let their groups exist. With them rushing over to this location, how could they resist against them with just this amount of manpower? Ye Qingling glanced at the valley and bit her teeth. She immediately responded, "We should stop them for now. Mu Chen is currently breaking through to the spirit stage. He cannot be disturbed right now." Wang Sheng exchanged gazes with the others. Could they even stop them? But since Ye Qingling was the one that said this, they could only comply with it. Ye Qingling rushed up to the highest point of the valley and stared out to the distance. Then she discovered 2 groups of men charging over to this location rapidly. Each group had dozens of individuals. "Ha ha 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 ha. Little beauty, we meet again." A figure rushed out from the group on the left. A dense spiritual energy emitted from his body as he let out a frivolous laughter. "Yang Gong?" Ye Qingling stared at the figure dressed in white and immediately frowned. She had met this person before. Although the latter had not participated in the spiritual road, his family was quite prosperous. By relying on numerous resources, he managed to enter the spirit stage initial phase. "Humph, your Ye clan truly has guts. You dare steal the item that I, Zhou Li, had taken a liking to. You must have a death wish." From the other group of men, a figure dressed in black charged out with a cold expression. He stared unkindly at Ye Qingling. "It's the Yang clan and the Zhou clan." Wang Sheng and the others' expressions immediately changed. The 2 groups were well-known forces within this region. Their strength was in no way inferior to their Ye clan. Ye Qingling stared coldly at Yang Gong and Zhou Li. Both of them were at the spirit stage initial phase. With her alone, it would be difficult for her to fight against them. "Ye Qingling, hand over the yin-yang spirit zoisha," Zhou Li shouted. He had been eyeing at the yin-yang spirit zoisha for a few days. If it hadn't been for Yang Gong, he would have probably taken action already. How could he have expected that Ye Qingling would make a preemptive move on it? Ye Qingling's eyes flashed with an uneasy look. She smiled. "About the yin-yang spirit zoisha, it seemed that the other side wants it as well. If I were to hand it over to you, they would probably be dissatisfied." Zhou Li frowned and glanced at Yang Gong. "Oh ho ho, not only are you beautiful, but you're also as cunning as a fox. I like it." Yang Gong laughed and looked at Zhou Li as he said, "Brother Zhou must have seen through this sort of psychological action, right? Why don't we temporarily join forces to capture this beauty? When that happens, the beauty will belong to me, and I'll let you have the yin-yang spirit zoisha. How's that?" "Good." Zhou Li's eyes lit up. His personality was different than Yang Gong. Thus, the yin-yang spirit zoisha was more attractive to him. Ye Qingling's face changed slightly when she noticed that the two of them formed a temporary alliance. Haha, little beauty, you should just follow me around. I will definitely treat you well. Yang Gong laughed loudly. Then he charged directly at Ye Qingling. At the same time, Zhou Li rushed over as well. They surrounded Ye Qingling. Ye Qingling's expression turned slightly cold, and a dense spiritual energy also erupted from her. Although it would be difficult for her to face two spirit stage powerhouses, there was no other choice. She could only stall for as long as possible. Boom! But just when Ye Qingling was about to attack, an extremely violent spiritual energy suddenly emitted from a slope nearby. The surrounding forest was instantly destroyed by it. This violent spiritual energy fluctuation instantly surprised both Yang Gong and Zhou Li. They hurriedly turned their gaze over and noticed a massive spiritual array slowly emerging on the slope. In front of the spiritual array, a lovable and cute girl with twin tails were staring at them grumpily. Since you're bullying my sister, you must be looking for a beating. Her voice resounded out as her hands quickly formed a few seals. The massive spiritual array above her immediately circulated, and violent spiritual energy quickly gathered. Wind Dragon Sky Smash Array. Roar! Within the massive blue spiritual array, a blue light gathered and swept across the sky. An enormous wind dragon burst out from the array, carrying sand and rumbling spiritual energy towards the Yang Gong and Zhou Li. As Yang Gong and Zhou Li stared at the formidable wind dragon, their faces instantly changed. Roar! As the wind dragon roared, furious winds bellowed and numerous wind blades swept across the sky. The space left behind seemed to have been ripped apart by these wind blades. This powerful attack instantly changed Yang Gong and Zhou Li's expressions. The spiritual array that Suner had activated was extremely powerful. It was probably on the same level as Mu Chen's Golden Revolution Soul Reaver spiritual array. It was certain that even someone at the spirit stage initial phase would die if it hit them. Before this entire thing had happened, Mu Chen was extremely cautious and made Suner hide quietly for an ambush. He had told her to secretly prepare a spiritual array so that she could arrange it when something terrible happens. Mu Chen knew that Suner had barely any combat experience. Thus, he could not let her fight against others in a head-on battle. Instead, by making her hide, she could finally display the power that she rightfully possessed. And the current situation proved that Mu Chen's arrangements had indeed been correct. Without people disturbing her, the spiritual array that Suner arranged was in no way inferior to his own. Yang Gong and Zhou Li's face changed as they stared at the approaching wind dragon. It was evident that they had perceived a spiritual energy fluctuation that even they would fear. If they were hit by such an attack, it was almost certain that they would be killed. It's not so easy to kill us. However, Yang Gong and Zhou Li were not ordinary individuals. They never felt despair, even in such a circumstance. Instead, they let out cold shouts as they gripped their own hands. Then a clump of light was unleashed from each of their respective hands. Boom! A dense spiritual energy erupted out from their palms. At this moment, Ye Qingling and the others noticed that a black iron shield had formed in front of Yang Gong. The black iron shield was covered with mysterious engravings, and a unique fluctuation emitted from it. And in front of Zhou Li, a gray stone stove had appeared. The stone stove also possessed a powerful spiritual energy fluctuation. On the surface, it too had many unique light engravings. Obsidian Spirit Shield! Spirit Stone Stove! These words were simultaneously shouted by Yang Gong and Zhou Li. Then, the shield and stove instantly let out a dazzling flashes as they protected the two of them. Bang! By the time the wind dragon had finally arrived, it had built up enough momentum and fiercely smashed against the black shield and stone stove. A formidable spiritual energy shockwave instantly resounded out. Swish! Two figures were shot down from the air awkwardly. However, they hurriedly stabilized their stances the moment their feet landed on the ground. The black shield and stone stove turned dimmer and finally disappeared within their hands. But from their appearance, the two of them did not suffer much damage. Spiritual artifacts? Once Ye Qingling noticed this scene, her heart sank slightly. Just earlier, Yang Gong and Zhou Li had both pulled out true spiritual artifacts. Their family background was truly impressive. At this moment, Yang Gong and Zhou Li's expressions both trembled. If it weren't for their spiritual artifacts, the two of them would have actually been killed by that little girl. You'll go and capture that little girl. I'll stall Ye Qingling, Yang Gong said in a solemn voice. At this moment, he had put away his jolly attitude. The little girl was too amazing. If another powerful spiritual array emerges, they would definitely suffer. Okay! Zhou Li also understood this point, so without further thought, he immediately nodded and rushed towards the distant slope where Sun'er was. Stop right there! Seeing Zhou Li charge towards Sun'er, Ye Qingling's face instantly changed. She hurriedly rushed out. However, just when she moved, Yang Gong had appeared in front of her. He smiled and said, "Little beauty, you should play with me instead. If you dare touch my sister, I will never forgive you." Ye Qingling's eyes were completely cold. A dense spiritual energy surged out of her body, and she attacked Yang Gong fiercely. "Ha ha!" Yang Gong laughed. However, he did not dare to be too careless. Ye Qingling wasn't weaker than him. If he were to underestimate her, then he would definitely pay a price. Thus, he too pushed his spiritual energy to the limits as he faced her. Boom! The two of them went all out. Their spiritual energy erupted, crushing the nearby boulders and trees to pieces. Just when Yang Gong started his fight against Ye Qingling, Sun'er, who was on the distant mountain slope, noticed Zhou Li, who was approaching with murderous intent. She was shocked and immediately ran into the forest behind her. Zhou Li, who was originally tensed and wary of Sun'er, watched this scene and was completely startled. It was evident that he never expected Sun'er, who made both him and Yang Gong feel death, would actually flee immediately. "Where are you planning to go?" However, Zhou Li quickly recovered from the shock. Sun'er was even more dangerous than Ye Qingling. If she were to hide herself and stealthy arrange a spiritual array, they wouldn't have the luck to survive again. He absolutely had to capture her. Swish! A dense spiritual energy surged from Zhou Li's body. Then he chased after Sun'er like a gale. Rumbling spiritual energy surged through Mu Chen's limbs and bones like a flood. As he circulated the great pagoda art with all his strength, he was constantly absorbing the pure spiritual aura from the yin-yang spirit Zoisha. In the end, it had all flowed into his aura sea and empowered the spiritual energy light wheel within it. Buzz. As the dense spiritual energy entered, the spiritual energy light wheel expanded constantly. It finally became the size of an adult's palm, and the area surrounding the light wheel was covered with lights. It had the appearance of a vast, mysterious universe. Mu Chen felt the spiritual energy within his aura sea increase at an alarming speed, yet his mind gradually calmed down. With the great pagoda art circulating at full strength, he had finally ingested the last portion of pure spiritual energy from the yin-yang spirit Zoisha. Once the final portion entered his spiritual energy light wheel, a strange feeling instantly filled Mu Chen's heart. This feeling was as though everlasting ripples had appeared in a calm, serene spring. At this moment, the spiritual energy light wheel had completely stopped circulating. Waves of spiritual energy rippled on the surface of the light wheel. Then, Mu Chen examined the spiritual energy that had gushed out and gathered on the surface of the spiritual energy light wheel. The spiritual energy converged, and once the light dispersed, a petite light figure, who was sitting cross-legged, had emerged on top of the spiritual energy light wheel. It was extremely blurry, yet it seemed to be quite similar to Mu Chen. But because it was too blurry, it was impossible to look at it clearly. In the instant that the petite light figure was formed, a mysterious feeling appeared within Mu Chen's heart. He immediately concentrated, and changes appeared within his gaze. He had actually turned into the petite figure who was sitting cross-legged on top of the spiritual energy light wheel. So this is a spirit! Mu Chen realized that this was probably the biggest change as a spirit stage compared to the spiritual rotation stage. Once he condensed this spirit, he had truly stepped into the realms of the spirit stage. Mu Chen's thoughts quickly fused with the petite spirit, and he opened his eyes. His figure quickly moved, and he emerged outside of the mandala flower. Then he smiled as he stared at the 9 nether bird within it. At this moment, the 9 nether bird instantly became alert once it noticed the petite figure outside. Once a human reached the spirit stage, they would have the ability to ingest a spiritual beast's soul essence. In other words, Mu Chen has finally obtained a measure to deal with it now. It had never doubted how appealing it was to humans. As long as they ingested its soul essence, they would be able to obtain the mighty abilities of a 9 nether bird. To many powerhouses, this was extremely tempting. Ha ha! The petite spirit grinned at the 9 nether bird, and it let out a malicious laugh. As expected, humans are truly up to no good. The 9 nether bird's black flames instantly rose, and thoughts filled with rage echoed within Mu Chen's aura sea. If you want to ingest me, I will not let you get away with it easily. The nine nether bird spread out its wings as it shouted angrily. The petite spirit watched the nine nether bird, who overreacted and was completely speechless. He said helplessly, "But I never said that I wanted to ingest you." The black flames rising from the nine nether bird's body instantly froze. It was skeptical as it asked, "Then why did you come over here?" "I have just condensed a spirit, so I wanted to show it off to you." Mu Chen's voice was filled with ridicule. It was evident that he had acted this way on purpose. The nine nether bird had never given him face. Thus, now that he was able to torment it, he felt pretty great. The nine nether bird finally realized the meaning behind Mu Chen's actions, and anger instantly filled its eyes. The wings that emitted black flames swept severely against the light barrier. "Scram!" This violent bird. Mu Chen smiled. He said seriously, "Relax. My promise is definitely true. I understand that I would benefit a lot if I ingest you, but no matter how powerful one is, I look down upon people who can't even keep a promise. Therefore, there is no need for you to worry. If it wasn't for your help, I probably wouldn't have a father anymore." The nine nether bird slowly folded its wings. Although its eyes were still filled with fierceness, the depths of its eyes had softened up. Although this bastard was quite vindictive, at least he was still commendable in certain areas. After Mu Chen finished saying these words, he controlled the petite spirit and returned it back to the spiritual energy light wheel. As long as he entered the spirit stage, this petite spirit would be capable of automatically circulating the Great Pagoda art. It would achieve an effect of cultivation. In addition, once he started circulating the Great Pagoda art with his own body, the cultivation would be twice as effective. Thus, this petite spirit was extremely beneficial to his cultivation. The spirit stage is truly impressive. Mu Chen let out in praise. His mind focused as he completed the final circulation of his Great Pagoda art before finally exiting the cultivation state. Buzz. But at this moment, he felt a buzzing sound emerging from within his body. He hesitated slightly and carefully sensed this buzzing sound. Then he discovered that a sudden surge of information appearing from his heart. Mu Chen checked the information that was delivered to him, and a hint of surprise filled his heart. Had he actually activated something within the Great Pagoda art due to his breakthrough into the spirit stage? The Great Pagoda art that Mother left behind is truly mysterious. Mu Chen gathered his thoughts and completely read the information handed to him. It seemed that a mysterious spiritual art was hidden within the information. It was Vajra Pagoda. That wraps up the content for today's episode. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel to get notifications for the next episode. For now, goodbye, and see you next time.